I wanted to share a little bit about background information about GAVE, or the Golden Age Village for the Elderly. So GAVE is a not-for-profit organization that was established in 2013 to address the senior housing and long-term care facility crises faced by elderly Vietnamese Canadians in the GTA. GAVE was officially registered with the CRA as a charity in 2014. Our mission is to provide affordable housing and support services, including personal care, meals, nursing, and medical assistance. To carry out our mission, we are building a campus of care village to provide culturally sensitive, long-term care to seniors in the community. The campus is located in Brampton and is expected to be completed by 2025. Additionally, we are committed to investing in our youth, such as by hosting scholarships in our annual webinars. And a link to our website can be found in the chat. So to quickly outline how the event will look like today, we will begin with a moderated panel discussion with our lovely panelists, and all their bios can be found in the PDF that was sent to the chat recently. And at the very end, we will be having a Q&A session that's interactive, meaning anyone from the audience will submit your questions for our panelists to answer. So if you have any questions prior to the time or during that time, you can feel free to message the group chat, or you can private message our tech support, whose name is tech support right now, and they will post your question into the main chat. So I guess without further ado, perhaps we may be able to, get started with our prompts soon. So with the first question, how about we ask our panelists to briefly describe your roles or jobs? For example, how does a typical day go? What do you enjoy most about your job? And what are the work hours like? So maybe if Catherine can start us off.
Sure. Morning, everyone. So I'm a physician assistant. I'll give a brief summary of what I do. So we're physician extenders, and so we extend the services of whichever supervising physician that we work for. So I work in neurosurgery. I work with two of the neurosurgeons there, and they each specialize in special conditions. I also work with two other PAs as well, and they each have different supervising physicians, and they each see different conditions. So we mainly work in the outpatient clinic, but we also have OR time. And then there's also PAs that work in the inpatient clinic. So I do a lot of the inpatient clinic. Typical day goes. So I just started my job in November. I graduated around that time as well. So what I do is I usually show up to the hospital and I pre-chart on the patients that I have that day. And then in the morning, I'll meet with the supervising physician that I'm working with that day. And often the cases that I need help with, or I want input from the doc, I'll go over with him. The ones that I feel a bit more comfortable with, I won't go over with him. And then oftentimes he'll be in the OR. So I'm kind of in clinic alone. I'll see the patient, do the whole physical exam, tell them the plan. Oftentimes, because it's surgery, we'll consent them to surgery in clinic. And then throughout the day, my supervising physician will kind of pop in and out. They're always available, usually by phone, and they'll kind of check up on me to see if I need further help. And then on Fridays, usually, the residents that we work with have an academic day. So a lot of the times PAs have first assist in the OR on that days. So it's a really great balance between kind of patient care, OR time, and I like that it's a teaching facility, so you get to work with a lot of the other residents there. There's a bunch of fellows that we work with as well in a lot of different specialties. So kind of what I like most about the job is because the two doctors that I work with, they're the directors of the residency program. I like that there's a lot of lots of medical students we have, different year residents, and it's nice because a lot of times you probably did undergrad with them, or you see them around the hospital. And we collaborate with a lot of different specialties, especially the two docs that I work with. So we work with people in medical oncology, radiation oncology, endocrinology. So it's just nice to kind of collaborate with other people. Work hours, so they vary. I'm kind of the typical clinic hours on Monday to Thursday. So clinic can run anytime between 8:45 and then the last patient's probably around 4. doesn't really work out quite like that, just because I'm also really new. So I do show up a lot earlier just to kind of pre-chart on people, make sure I feel okay, to go through the clinic day. And then I also do the notes and everything the same day as well. So I usually just stay at the hospital to get all that stuff done. So it varies a lot. There's some days where there's half days and I'll be at the hospital kind of by 1 or 2. And then there's days I'll stay quite late. And sometimes there's admissions that we have to do directly from clinic, and that kind of makes the work hours unpredictable. But overall, so far, it's been decent work hours. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. You have like that nice balance, and it seems a very dynamic environment, which is great because I also love interacting with people. So I think that's a great environment. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Okay.
How about next, Nhien? Like to share your experiences?
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Nhien, and I'm a PhD student under the Institute of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Toronto. And so for me as a PhD student, right now I'm performing research in the context of cardiovascular modeling for coronary artery bypass graft surgery. And so specifically what I do in my research is I perform simulations, fluid dynamic simulations, to simulate how blood flows in the coronary arteries and bypass grafts. And we're trying to see if any hemodynamic measures from these simulations can correlate to graft remodeling and failure, because for these surgeries, graft failure is something that can affect patients in the long term. In terms of what the actual, I guess, job is like, the day-to-day kind of varies. Because I'm a PhD student, there's a bit more flexibility. So my day-to-day can have things such as classes. I do things related to my research. So in my case, my research is computational. So a lot of my day involves running simulations and analyzing the data, reading papers, and things like that. During the school year, I also have TA positions. So sometimes my day will consist of running tutorials or labs. And during the summer, I am also currently supervising some undergraduate students. So I guess my day has a mix of a lot of different things. But overall, the work hours aren't a strict 9 to 5, because as a PhD student, I am still a student. So I do have some flexibility in when and how I want to do my work, especially because it's computational and I can work remotely. But I do try to stick to a set schedule, just because it's nice to be able to schedule things and say, okay, at this time, then I'm off the clock and I can do what I want with my day. But overall, what I like about being a PhD student is that, unlike, with an undergrad where you're just mainly doing courses and trying to gain knowledge, I'm able to actually perform research that I'm interested in doing. And I'm able to sort of define what I want to do within the research problem that my supervisor has proposed. And I can also work to develop specific skills that I'm interested in developing.
No, that's awesome. I like that you have some control over what you're doing, and it seems very great. Thank you, Nhien. So next up, maybe we'll ask Stephen to share his insights.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. So just a little background about myself. I'm in technology and I work within the software development lifecycle. In terms of how my typical day goes, really, we follow the Agile framework, which is a type of way we do software development. So what we do to start off our day is we join a daily sign-up. So our team gets together and we talk about things that we worked on yesterday and things that we're going to work on today, and if there's any blockers, and how we can resolve those blockers as a team. And then the majority of the day, you're working on your proposed tickets or work that's coming into the pipeline. And we follow 2-week sprint cadences. And so if you're familiar with the Agile framework and you want to get into software development, I would say Agile is the framework that you need to know. Most companies today are following that. I enjoy talking to all of my team members. I enjoy having a big team. So that's my product managers, my business analysts, my developers, Even my release managers really enjoy just talking to everyone and resolving problems. In terms of work hours, it is a typical 9 to 5, but they're not too stringent on you swaying away from that time as well. So I would say in technology, you can work with your company, just talk to them and see what their policies are. For me personally, I have a work from home policy and I can set my own hours. So if I don't want to work during the day, I don't need to, but I do need to be accountable for my work to be done by the deadline.
Thank you, Stephen. It's actually great to be able to see that you do have that flexibility of like managing your work-life balance. So that's a great option for many students, I can imagine. Thank you. So next up, let's ask Melissa to share her experiences.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I work as a senior evaluator with the Chemicals Management Plan under Environment and Climate Change Canada. So my day will vary from meetings to independent work. I'm responsible for writing risk assessments of metals to evaluate their potential risk on the environment and its biological diversity. So that would include reading and interpreting and analyzing scientific literature and submissions of environmental monitoring data. What I enjoy about this job is the constant opportunity to learn, whether it's a new software for modeling or it's like effects data on different metals. There's always something for me to learn, so it doesn't get boring. And my current hours, I work 9 hours a day and I get every other Friday off.
That's awesome. I can imagine a lot of people enjoying a Friday off, but ultimately it does seem great that you're able to have that kind of dynamic environment again and to keep it interesting. So thank you, Melissa. Last but not least, we have Johnny.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I'm going to talk about a career as a doctor. I have 2 medical specialties. One is in emergency medicine, and the second specialty is in interventional pain medicine. So as an emergency doctor, I typically work 8-hour shifts. I see anything and everything that comes to the hospital, whether that's something mild, like, for example, just mild COVID-19 or cough or sore throat, to everything more serious, from heart attacks to strokes to stabbing victims, gunshot victims, massive car accidents. Anything and everything that walks through the door is fair game. So as an emergency doctor, you don't really know what your day is going to be like. You know you have an 8-hour shift, but you don't know if it's going to be a simple day where everyone just has a cough from COVID-19, or if it's going to be a difficult day where you're spending hours and hours resuscitating a patient that was in a life-threatening car accident. Because emergency medicine is such an intense career, I also work in a clinic on the side as an interventional pain physician. What we do as an interventional pain specialist is we help manage people's pain that were not able to be managed in other ways. For example, I've had patients that came in after the horrific car accidents. They've had 3 different spine surgeries, yet they still have severe back pain. So they come to me and ask me to help them manage their back pain. Another example would be a patient that has breast cancer. Unfortunately, the breast cancer spread to her brain, so she has severe headaches every single day of her life. So she comes to me to get procedures done to help manage her headaches. So whereas being an emergency doctor, my focus is on saving lives from a life-threatening situation, my role as a pain specialist is to help improve a patient's quality of life. And that quality of life is very personal depending on the patient. Some patients come to me and say, Dr. Johnny, I want you to help me improve my back pain so that I can go back to work. I need to work so I can provide for my family. Other patients will have a bigger ask and they'll tell me, Dr. Johnny, I know I have cancer. I know I don't have long left on this earth. Can you please help with my headaches so that I can spend time with my family and enjoy my time with them? And other patients will have even more simple things. For example, they'll say, Dr. Johnny, I've had 3 knee surgeries, none of them worked. I just want you to help me with my knee pain so I can take my child to the park. So every patient that comes to me to get their pain managed comes for a different reason, and it's a very personal thing. But I really like this role because it helps me to provide for patients and alleviate their suffering.
That's great. Thank you very much, Johnny. I'm glad to hear that you have such a fulfilling experience through your job role, and like similar to other jobs to talk to some before too. It's great to see how I guess you guys do have that dynamic environment in which everything is not just the same every single day, and yeah. So thank you all very much for sharing. That was very insightful. So I guess we'll go on to our next prompt, which is how did you end up in your current role? For example, how did your degree or university experiences contribute to your current role? And were there any pre-requirements for your job? For example, any postgraduate school requirements? So I guess we'll go the same order. So Catherine, if you could start us off again.
Sure, yeah. Just wanted to touch on kind of what Johnny was saying. A lot of the patients that he was talking about with this, they've had 3 back surgeries, still pain, or they've had a brain tumor removed, lots of headaches, are typical patients that we see, and we refer a lot to pain medicine, and they're always really helpful. We couldn't do anything without them. So that's nice to see that you're involved in that role. How did I end up in my current role? So I did 4 years of undergrad in biomed at the University of Ottawa. And then there are 3 different schools or civilian schools that offer the physician assistant program. And I sent a link to Michelle that she'll send out a bit later, but it kind of compares different routes people take and different requirements. So I went to the University of Toronto for PA school. And so for U of T, you can apply right out of second year. However, most people in my class will have completed an undergrad, some have completed a master's, some have completed a PhD, and some have completed a separate career and then they switched over. So we have some nurses in our classes, and I think in another class, there was even a dental student that kind of switched halfway. And U of T specifically requires, when I applied, I think it was a minimum of 900 hours. And I think during COVID, they decreased the direct patient care experience to around 100, just because it was hard for people to get access to volunteer positions. And then throughout my undergrad, I was involved in a lot of the school clubs that we did. I also volunteered as a medical assistant at this interdisciplinary medical clinic for about 4 years. And that's where I kind of saw different medical specialties. And at the time that I was at that clinic, it kind of transitioned from a family med clinic to a dermatology clinic to a gynecology clinic. So I got exposed to a lot of different specialties, which was really nice. And then the PA program, it's 24 months. So that's the same for University of Toronto, McMaster's 24 months. And the third school is the University of Manitoba, and they're a master's program. So you would have to complete an undergrad first. And they also have a thesis project as well. The main difference about the University of Toronto is it's a distance-based education. So a lot of us come from all over Canada, pretty much. So I'm from Ottawa. We have people from Thunder Bay, Sudbury. So how it works is that the first year, it's didactic. So it's a lot of online learning kind of the foundation of medicine. So a lot of the learning that can be done at home, people will do at home, and we would go to a testing center to write our exams. And during COVID, it was online. And then we have these residential blocks where we would all travel to Toronto to learn the hands-on learning. So those are in person. They're about a month at a time, multiple times throughout the year. And then through first year, we have these longitudinal clinical experiences. So you would kind of work at one of the clinics near where you live. And then in second years, when we do our clerkship year, so we do all our placements for University of Toronto. One thing that kind of stands out about it is they have these southern swaps. So if you're from Southern Ontario, for example, like me, I would do 5 of my rotations kind of in the Ottawa area. And then the other 5, they would kind of place you anywhere in the north. So I went to Timmins for 2 of my rotations. So that's kind of what's nice about it. So I kind of touched on the pre-requirements a bit, and then there's a really good link that Michelle will send later with kind of a nice table comparing the different prereqs for each of these schools. I will say in general, there's not a lot of prereqs necessarily for the schools, but they do have kind of preferred criteria. So if you took certain classes, certain hours. And for U of T, also, if you have an understanding of what Northern healthcare looks like, the struggles that they have, and kind of if you've lived in the North, that's kind of a preferred criteria. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. That was very in-depth and perfect. Thank you. Yeah, it seems interesting that you can have be able to sign in, for example, the U of T school from like almost anywhere, which just seems very convenient for some people who may not be able to like travel. So that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, next up we'll have Nhien.
Okay, so how I ended up in my current role, I guess I'll give a little bit more information about my background. So I did my undergrad in engineering science at U of T, and I specialized in biomedical engineering. And during my undergrad, during some summers, I did paid research internships, which helped me realize that I wanted to go down the path of research. And I also did an undergraduate thesis as well. So after I finished my undergrad, I didn't know if I wanted to commit to the full PhD or not, because it is at least another 4 years or so. So I decided to instead go into a research-based master's. So I did one in biomedical engineering at U of T. And after I finished my master's, I realized that research is something that I really wanted to do, which is why I decided to continue down this path with a PhD. And so even though I did a PhD after doing a master's, it is possible to just directly enter the PhD program after your bachelor's if you're really sure that research is something that you want to do. But in terms of the prereqs that are required for just research-based graduate programs in general, at minimum, you would definitely need a bachelor's degree. But for U of T, and at least I think most of the schools in Canada, actually, when you're applying to the program, you actually have to match with your research supervisor or your PI before you get admitted into the program, because your PI will be providing part of the funding package that you'll receive as a research-based graduate student. So so unlike when you do an undergrad, you actually get paid to go to school as a research-based student. So you'll get your tuition covered as well as some extra money for living expenses. But in terms of the application process, normally you would reach out to professors whose research you're interested in. And when you reach out to them, they would look at things like your grades, so your GPA, if you've taken relevant courses, and especially if you have relevant experiences, either in research or maybe you did, like a job that is in the same field or the same area of research that they're working in. So afterwards, after you reach out to the professors that you're interested in, they'll normally interview you. And if they like you, then they'll extend that offer of admission to you. And so once a supervisor or a professor has basically extended an offer of admission to you, then you're pretty much good to go, and you won't get into any trouble with actually going through the application process with the school and the faculty that you're specifically applying to.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nhien. Next up, we'll have Stephen.
Okay, so how did I end up in my current role? Well, looking back in university, so I went to school similar to Nhien for biomedical and electrical engineering. And so what really exposed me to software development really was my 4th year project. We built a product that allowed paralyzed patients to use basic computer functions. So what it really consisted of was taking in sensor values and implementing a sensor system really on a body, and it ran into the computer, and those inputs then translated to whatever you wanted to map those functions as, right? To say, for example, if I tilted my head to the right and I was wearing a head sensor, then I can trigger it to do a mouse move to the right. And so my role on that project was the software developer. So I built a Chrome app and wrote it in JavaScript. What I did was I went to the bookstore and I bought a How to Code in JavaScript book. It taught me myself that, and it was really fun, really enjoyed it. And so when I was finishing my 4th year and deciding on where to apply and what to do, similar to Nhien, there was a master's research program that I was considering, and then there was technology and the field out there. And so I got a job as a software developer for Java. But quickly after 4 months of that, I realized I didn't want to do that. So what I did was I accepted a role at TD Bank as a manual tester. And within software testing, it's very repetitive. So if you like repetitive tasks, manual testing is the way to go. But what I did was I started automating a lot of my tests and starting implementing my knowledge of code and kind of utilizing it to do my work for me. And then that's where it opened the world up to automation. I worked at TD for about 5.5 years, and then I was all the way up to managing multiple teams, offshore, onshore, and nearshore teams within the testing space. And then recently, I have left the corporate world to join a startup. And the reason for that was less responsibility, but higher pay. Really, that was the main point, the less responsibility, so I can focus on my real estate investing goals. But if you're ever looking to go into technology, I wouldn't say there is no set personality, no set degree or background you need to come from. But that's about it. Thank you, guys.
That's great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Next up, we have Melissa.
So there's a combination of two main things that helped me get to my current role. And it seems to be a recurring theme that the fourth year undergraduate research project was beneficial in my experience as well. So the funding for my research project was in part by the chemicals management plan. And so that allowed me to meet managers with that program. So it created the opportunity for networking. And then my research project was looking at the effects of flame retardants on genomic expressions of chicken embryonic cells. And then the second part that helped me get to my position was getting into the government system. It started when I took a summer job out in Campbell River on Vancouver Island through the Federal Student Work Exchange Program. I sent a link to Michelle, and I found the experience highly valuable. They also paid more at the time for the summer jobs. So that job was going out I was there for their field season. So almost every day we were going out on a boat to various parts of the West Coast, collecting benthic samples, or going to shellfish farms to survey the land. And that got me into the government database so that it was easier for managers to hire me, to complete the contracting to hire me for when I finished school.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Melissa. And next up is Johnny.
So talking about becoming a doctor is challenging because there's so many different pathways to becoming a doctor. For myself personally, after high school, I did 4 years of undergraduate studies, 4 years of medical school, 2 years of residency, 1 year of an emergency medicine fellowship, and 1 year of interventional pain medicine fellowship. So I spent about 12 years in school. So if you don't like being in school, probably shouldn't become a doctor because you're going to be in school for at least 12 years for most specialties. Specialists like neurosurgeons that Catherine works with probably went to school for even longer than that. A lot of them did their residency training, then they did a PhD, then they did 2 or 3 fellowships in specialized surgeries. So I've heard of neurosurgeons going to school for 17 years sometimes. So if you pick a career in medicine, you have to be in it for the long haul. You have to start when you're young and have an expectation for 10 to 15 years in school. Now, in terms of how things work, out of undergraduate, you'll study for 4 years. During the undergraduate degree, you'll have to write an MCAT exam. This is a standardized test that everyone all across the world writes, and they rank you against other students. When you apply to medical school, they'll look at your volunteering experiences, your research experiences, your MCAT scores, your grades, and what degrees you have. Half of my class had just an undergraduate degree, and the other half had master's degrees or PhDs. The year I applied to the University of Toronto, they took 250 students, and they had 4,000 applicants. it is very, very tough and very, very competitive to get into a career in medicine. The average age of the applicants to the University of Toronto was 26. Typically, you'll finish your undergraduate degree by the age of 22. So that just goes to show you many people had to apply more than once, or they came back after doing a master's or PhD, or they were in a different profession entirely and then came back because they decided that they wanted to pursue a career in medicine. Once you finish applying for medical school and you're in, you spend 2 years in what's called pre-clerkship, where you'll be studying just textbooks and writing exams and just getting a foundation of knowledge about medicine and all the different specialties. The last 2 years of medical school, we call it clerkship, is you'll be doing rotations in different fields, whether you like them or not. So for example, even if you know in your heart you want to be a neurosurgeon, you may have to still do internal medicine and cardiology and gastroenterology. For myself, I knew I wanted to do emergency medicine and pain medicine, and I had to grind through things I didn't like to do, like for example, gynecology. I absolutely hate that, but I had to do 6 weeks of it. So you'll go through all these different specialty training in clerkship, and at the end of it, they'll ask you, what specialty would you like to pursue? For many people, they'll get their first choice. I think about 80% of people in medical school get their first choice of specialty, but it's really stressful because 20% of applicants, they don't get their first specialty. So for example, a very competitive field would be something like cardiology, internal medicine, and I think only about half the applicants actually get in, and the other half have to pick a different specialty, or dermatology, or plastic surgery, for example, all very competitive specialties, and a lot of people don't get their first choice, or they don't get the first choice in the city they want. After residency, depending on what you study, you may have to do additional training in what's called a fellowship. So if you did internal medicine, you can now do fellowship training in cardiology or gastroenterology or endocrinology to specialize even further. For myself personally, I did my residency training in family medicine. I enjoyed it, but I realized I wanted something more challenging. So I went back to school and I did my fellowship training in emergency medicine and interventional pain medicine. All in all, it took about 12 years. You get paid for part of it. So during residency, you'll get a salary. During fellowship, you'll get a salary. It won't be much, but it'll help you get by. But you can expect to graduate from 10 years of medical training with about $200,000 to $300,000 in debt. You'll be able to make it all back, but it is a long haul. So you can't just quit in the middle of it. You can't be $200,000 in debt and decide to quit halfway. You really need to have the conviction to complete all the years of training and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So really, I can't stress this enough. If you know in your heart that you want to be a doctor, it's very worth it. But if you're not sure, this might not be the right profession because there's so much time and effort and money that goes into this training.
Thank you very much, Johnny, for sharing that very honest take on the whole medicine path. So thank you all very much for sharing. It's very interesting to see how somewhat similar science degrees can take everyone to very different pathways. So I really appreciate it. So now for our last question for the panel discussion, we have, what advice do you have for others pursuing the same career? And this is very open-ended. So I guess we'll start again with Catherine.
Sure, yeah. So I think for me, what I would tell people if they're pursuing the PA career is that one of the kind of the different things that stand out about our profession is that our training is similar. It's mirrored to the kind of the medical model that medical students undergo. So they have 2 years of pre-clerkship and then 2 years of clerkship. So ours is, we have 1 year of clerkship and then, 1 year of pre-clerkship and then 1 year of clerkship. And then in clerkship year, we also go through all the rotations, all the specialties. Even if you don't really like them, you still have to do them. They're anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks long. You rotate through them. It can be anywhere. And then kind of, we have 2 electives at the end. One of the different things is that we have that mobility, lateral mobility to kind of switch specialties. So a lot of some of my classmates will start out, let's say, in family medicine for a few years, and then down the line, they may switch into neurosurgery. One of my colleagues took that path. And then some people will do neurosurgery for a while, realize they want to try something else. So then you can switch different specialties. And you can switch it doesn't have to be in the same city. So for me, I think what I found helpful was that when I was kind of volunteering my undergraduate education is I exposed myself to just a lot of different specialties just to kind of see what their role was like. I volunteered at an outpatient setting in the community as well as in the hospital just to kind of see what different roles were, to kind of figure out what specialties I liked, what type of patient care I wanted to be involved with. So I would say that. And then in terms of work-life balance, I think I'm still figuring that out. A lot of my classmates, I am a new grad. We're still trying to figure out that work-life balance. A lot of times it's a steep learning curve, especially if you pick a subspecialty. So we're trained kind of in general medicine. So it's more tailored towards, I would say, family medicine. We actually do 3 family medicine rotations, and that's something that the University of Toronto changed to before. So in the beginning, all of my classmates kind of do not work that typical 9 to 5, even though that's kind of the clinic hours. Lots of learning goes into it outside of the clinic time. There's a lot of rounds, especially in the hospital. You don't have to go to them, but they're helpful for your career if you want to stay in that specialty. So I'm still trying to figure that out. I think one thing that is helpful is that I basically try to do everything at the hospital. So I'll show up, pre-chart there, try to do all my notes and everything at the hospital and not bring it home. Sometimes I will, just because there's just a lot to do. But I try to keep everything at the hospital. And once I leave the hospital, I don't really want to bring anything beyond work home. I have weekends off. Not all of my classmates do. Some of them are on call. Some of them work several weekends, depending on what you do. We have some of my classmates in trauma surgery. So they'll actually do kind of 4 shifts, longer shifts, and they'll have some days off. And it kind of just depends what specialty you pick. And I think for me, good kind of work-life balance is I schedule things. So I make time for things that make me happy, things, friends and family. So I schedule that ahead of time, and I make it a non-negotiable. So I make sure that I go to it. So that's kind of how I'm figuring that out right now. In terms of overcoming challenges, I would say I found PA school challenging. A lot of my classmates would say the same. It's very fast-paced learning, especially during COVID as well. Lots of changes, and we kind of had to adapt to them. So I think the way that we overcame them, I think, is just by kind of talking to people in similar situations as you, seeing how they handle things, and kind of maybe working together, incorporating that into your life. And yeah, for me, just kind of talking about it helps. Also taking things kind of one step at a time, also keeping in mind the big picture, but kind of making a plan and steps along the way, and just focusing on the first step that you have to get to the goal that you want, I find is helpful.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for your honest take. We understand that honestly, work-life balance is not something that's like easy, like very formulaic. It's so different for everyone, and I think everyone always has room to improve there. So thank you very much for sharing. Next up, we have Nhien.
Yeah, so I think in general, whether or not you want to pursue research, one of my biggest advice would be during your undergrad, definitely experience different things over the summer, whether that's research or an internship at a company, so that you have a better idea of what you want to do, or maybe what you don't want to do. And the experiences that you have over the summer can lead you to future positions, even if these experiences aren't necessarily directly related to what you end up doing. And I guess for research and applying to graduate programs, don't be afraid to apply to programs that you think may be out of reach, or reach out to professors because you think you're unqualified, or you think that you don't have the right experience, because in the context of research and also in other jobs, you'll always be learning new things on the job. And in fact, my current research position, my supervisor actually accepted me before I had any experience in running computational fluid dynamics simulations, but I accepted it, and he accepted me because it was interesting to me, and I was willing to learn. And actually in my first year of my master's, I learned a lot about this area through my courses. And I think the most important thing the most important skill in research is being able to learn quickly and to adapt what you're learning to the problem that you're trying to research. And similarly, when you are a graduate student, don't be afraid to apply to as many scholarships as you can. Don't be afraid to apply to TA positions. If you're able to get it, the extra income is definitely a nice bonus to your graduate stipend. In terms of maintaining a work-life balance, as a student, sometimes it can be hard to set boundaries because there's always something more that you can be doing. In my case, especially because my research is remote, I can always be, doing something from home. So for me, I like to set up just a structured schedule for myself where, from certain hours, I'm sort of on the clock. But outside of those hours, I take time for myself, for my mental health, and just setting up a structured schedule in general, I think is beneficial just so you don't over or underwork yourself. For research, because the projects are very long and there's always lots of things involved, it's always good to just take things one step at a time, I think. And in terms of overcoming challenges, the good thing about being a university student is that the university does actually give you access to lots of different resources, whether it's related to your academics, any courses that you take. If you're having issues with your supervisor, or if you need mental health resources, the university does have those resources in place. And so if you need that help, don't be afraid to reach out and ask if you're struggling for anything, because there's never any shame in asking for help when you need it. Also, because as a graduate student, you're a member of a research group, you'll also have sort of a community of your lab mates, so other graduate students, as well as your supervisor, who will help you if you're stuck in your research, if you need advice or mentorship or anything. Those people will be your core support group.
Thank you very much, Nhien. Next up, we have Stephen.
So when you're trying to enter technology, I think I can speak to at least automation development and software testing. So when I'm interviewing for a candidate to join my team, I'm really looking at a number of things. I'm looking at the skills they bring to me as is. So I ask them questions regarding, I'm not going to go into full details, but API, UI, automation. I'll be talking to them about the different tools they've used, ones that they have even just tinkered with. And I'll be asking them specific questions on whether, how to perform basic functionality in those tools. But what's most important, I think, is your ability and willingness to learn. You just need to show that you are competent enough to learn and that you are willing to put in that work, because none of this work here is really rocket science, right? You can pick it up as you go along. You have mentors along the way, and we all understand that. We just need candidates that are willing to work and putting in that time and effort to bring their skills up to contribute to the company. And so I think it's really important that you present yourself that way when looking, not even just in technology, but any role out there, because they're all similar, right? You can have a somewhat similar background and apply somewhere, as long as you can show the competent skills and show that you are there for the long haul. You're there to learn, and you can, you have a lot of value that they want. Then they will take you on, right? It's just how you present yourself and how that comes across. In terms of work-life balance, I think time management is the most important. For me personally, I always have something other than my full-time job work-related going on. For example, in real estate investing, always have something on the go there. So time management is the most important thing that the skill that you can use here, really. And that's what you learn in school, I feel, with a postgraduate degree. You in your fourth year, you're really managing your own time to go to your classes, get your assignments done, and get your work done. And that's what you really take away from university, is the skill to learn how to learn. So just think about that when you are successful and you graduate from your bachelor's. How did you do that? You found a way for yourself to learn, right? And you applied that into whatever field you're doing. The same thing follows postgraduate outside of school. So as long as you're applying yourself and applying ways to learn solutions and solutioning different real life applications, I think you can do anything you want and the world is your oyster.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Stephen. Next up, we have Melissa.
So my advice for anybody looking to get into a government role, to keep applying. The hiring process can be a bit long, but don't let that discourage you. There are so many interesting science-based, technical science-based roles within government that I wasn't aware of initially until I started working in government. And it's for all sectors within science. So like in my personal experience, I was at Health Canada with a focus on human health for a little bit, with fisheries and oceans, looking at marine biology, and then now with Environment Canada, looking and working predominantly chemistry based. So there's a wide variety of opportunities available in government, and don't be afraid to try different opportunities or different roles. So like previous panelists have said, you might not feel confident for the role that you're applying to, but they'll always teach you the skills that you need to learn. And also the learning that you accomplish, or the skills that you gain when you're getting a science degree, all of that time that you're putting into study, to work hard, to develop your skill set, those are the skills that you're going to transfer to like a working environment. And you never know as well, like what other opportunities like might open up for you by taking another role. Yeah, so don't be so hard on yourself when you start working.
Thank you very much, Melissa. That's very helpful. Next up, I'll send it over to Johnny.
So my best advice for everyone on this call that wants to pursue a career in medicine as a doctor would be to start early, start applying, preparing your application earlier. The reason for that is this: many students think about a career as a doctor in their third or fourth year of undergraduate. Unfortunately, that is not enough time to prepare a strong application. Like I mentioned earlier, for the University of Toronto Medical School, the year I applied, they only took 250 students, but they had 4,000 applicants. Many people that think last minute to apply for medicine, yes, they can apply, but they don't realize their application is not competitive. So you can even start as early as high school to prepare your application for medical school. You can start volunteering. You can start shadowing doctors at clinics. You can start with research, either volunteering at a lab doing research or a paid position in the summer. You can do research during undergraduate degrees. You also need to think ahead of time about a career in medicine, because you need very specific courses before applying for medical school. You also need to spend months studying for the standardized test called the MCAT. You also need to spend years developing a strong relationship with scientists and professors in order to get a letter of reference. You need 3 letters of reference for your medical school application. And I don't want to scare people, but the average person at the University of Toronto applied 3 times before getting in. So this is why I stress to everyone that asks for advice about getting into medical school, please, please, please start your application early, find out what you need. This application takes years of preparation to be a successful applicant to medical school. In terms of the second question that Michelle asked about work-life balance, that really depends on your specialty. So for example, the neurosurgeons that Catherine works with, the term work-life balance doesn't exist to them. They'll be like, oh, work-life balance, I read about that in the textbook, but I don't know what that actually is. They'll be working 100 hours a week sometimes in the hospital. They'll be on call for 24 hours a day, sometimes on call for 36 hours because they'll have clinic the next morning still. And that's an extreme example for neurosurgeons. Other specialties are much more lifestyle friendly. For example, I know family doctors and dermatologists that work half day on Mondays, and then the second half of Monday, they go to the spa. and get the nails done or whatever they do as a dermatologist. So your specialty really decides the type of work-life balance you have. And so if you decided that you really, really are dead set on being a specific type of surgeon, you may be working 100 hours per week. If you want a more relaxed specialty, for example, family medicine, you could work easily 20 to 40 hours a week, depending on your goals. And for most specialties, it's somewhere in the middle. For example, for myself as an emergency doctor and interventional pain doctor, we typically on average work 30 to 60 hours per week, depending on the person and depending on the week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Johnny. So now we'll be entering our Q&A session for the webinar. So for this, the audience can feel free to either private message our tech support or post in the general chat any questions they may have for our panelists, and they will answer it live on the Zoom call. I guess while we're waiting for people to send it in, perhaps we'll start off with a question to get things started. How about, before your current career, was there any other career field that you pursued or consider pursuing? Is there anyone that has any insight on that one?
Sure, I can. So I was biomedical and electrical engineering. So that opens up the world of possibilities. Like I said, similar to Nhien, research in biomedical, it's all research. So I really didn't like that. I don't like studying and sitting in front of books all the time. So I found out early on that's not what I wanted to do. So into software development, but it's really technology is so vast. It's such a big field, and I didn't realize that until I was actually applying, right? A lot of people, when they look into it, they see software developer and they're tunnel vision into that role. There are so many supporting roles and so many other roles in this huge cluster of technology that we call IT today. There are business analysts, there are business systems analysts, there are product owners, there are release manager, DevOps, testers, automation, manual testers. There are developers, and those go into specialties. So you have your backend developer, you have your front-end developers, you have your full stack developers, you have your cloud infrastructure. DevOps also breaks up into its own cluster of roles, right? So what I recommend you doing is really just researching, getting into anything in technology and kind of exposing yourself to all the different roles. Quickly, within 1 or 2 years, even a couple months, you'll be able to understand all the different roles that is available to you. And in technology, there is no specific degree that you need to have. I have a lot of colleagues that have college degrees. As long as you can show competency and get your foot in that door, start your experience off, start exposing yourself to what you want. And that's really my spiel on the possibilities are endless.
No, thank you. That is the purpose of the webinar, to explore all of the varieties within science, and I guess even within certain subspecialties such as like engineering. So thank you very much. Does anyone else want to share their insights on this question?
Yeah, I'd like to add on something. Like when I was applying from high school to universities, I did want to be a doctor. I feel like that's typical of anybody going into science. One of the options is, oh, be a doctor. But then I was like, yes. Then I realized the amount of schooling involved. I was like, nope, that's not for me. And so I found it really helpful to do informational interviews with, like, while I was in university. I'd meet with, like, if there was, I remember meeting with a toxicologist at a pharmaceutical company to ask about how they got into their role. People tend to be very nice if you go and you say, hey, like, can we meet for coffee, and get them a coffee, and just to ask about how they got into their role. Yeah, what schooling, what experiences, what that path was like for them, because it's different for everybody. And like Johnny was saying, even within the fields of doctors, like their experience with their job varies day to day, and their experience getting to that position varies. So it adds to like the whole, like when you finish school, there's like, you realize there's like an ocean of opportunities, and saying this doesn't help because there's so many ways to get to a certain goal. But I found that informational interviews helped a lot with trying to figure out, what kind of roles that you what roles that you would like to have to be in the end, or even in the short term.
So thank you, Melissa. That's awesome. For example, as an undergraduate student, also doing like a science degree, I had so many peers who come in thinking they're going to do one career, but then realize that it's not for them as they actually like go through the whole process of university and experiences. So thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so, thank you. Is there anyone else wants to share, or else we can move on to the next question? Okay, great. So our next question from the audience is, do you recommend any classes or courses to help you prepare for your career?
So I'm just going to answer that question and more specific to those of you that are interested in medicine. So if you go to the University of Toronto website, they'll tell you exactly which courses you need to apply for medical school. So you can look that up, and definitely it's important that you do that. Basically because many students don't realize they need chemistry before applying, or biology before applying. So make sure you just have the bare minimum requirements, and it's typically done in your first year of school. The big one that I've found to be a game changer for a lot of people though, is I tell people to pay money to do a course for the MCAT. There's different ways of studying for the MCAT. The MCAT is a standardized exam, but you are competing against the entire world, not just Canada, not just the US. Every single person around the world is graded on the MCAT, and they give you a percentile score based on how you could compare to your peers across the world. This is a very, very important exam. It's very challenging. You're competing against the smartest people all across the world. So you need to take it very seriously. Many people, they want to save money, or they don't want to spend too much time on it. So they buy a book from Amazon, they'll study for 1 or 2 weeks, and then they'll write the exam, and then they'll find out their score is not competitive. What you really want to be doing is paying money for the course. It's anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000, depending on the course. Take a couple of months to do the course, usually at least 3 months. I myself did the course in about 4 months. And then you want to write the exam. And it's an entire day exam, basically 9 to 5. But that one 9 to 5 exam day can change your life for the rest of your life, basically. So you really need to come prepared and take it seriously. I would highly recommend anyone applying for medicine to do a specific MCAT course.
Thank you very much, Shawnee. Is there anyone else that has insight on this prompt?
Oh, just a follow-up question in the chat. They asked how many times I wrote the MCAT. I just wrote it once. I studied for it at the end of second year, and then I spent that 4 months studying for it, and I wrote it at the beginning of September. I was very happy with my score, so I didn't have to write it again. I know a lot of my class, on average, I think about half the class wrote the MCAT twice, though. They didn't get a good score the first time, so they had to spend the next summer writing it a second time.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. Congratulations on that. All right, so I guess for the next question, what is the most useful skill that you've gained from your career? Is there anyone that wants to share about that?
I'll just quickly put this out there, and it's the ability to network and meet people. That's the most powerful thing that you can take away and learn. Something I wish I learned at an earlier stage in time, but always be networking, always be putting yourself out there. That's a huge thing.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, I know that's a very valuable skill for almost any profession. So thank you, Stephen.
I can add on to that as well. Definitely learning to work with changing priorities. In every role that I've had so far, things are not as straightforward as in school. You've got what classes you have to take, what tests are coming up, but in the working force, priorities change all the time, and you have to be adaptable to that. You have to let go of projects that you have maybe been working on for a while. And yeah, so there's that aspect that I didn't learn in school. And then on the technical side, statistics. When you're like in my job, we do a lot of data analysis, and so learning stats, taking more classes and stats would have helped.
Thank you, Melissa. Before we continue, I want to let everyone know that it is 12 p.m. So if you do have to drop off like completely, I can understand. However, if you're able to stay a little bit longer, I guess we could perhaps try to finish off the last 2 questions that we did receive. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. So was there anyone else that wanted to share about that one prompt about the what useful skill you've gained from your career? I saw Catherine raising her hand a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think what I kind of learned is bedside manner, the importance of that, and kind of compassionate healthcare, especially in surgery. A lot of times, people kind of have incidental findings, meaning that they have, let's say, a fall or something. They'll do a scan kind of to rule out something else, and then they'll find a tumor on the scan. And a lot of times it's shocking for a lot of people and their families that are involved, and then the journey that kind of follows that. Is surgery. A lot of people that come to the clinic have never had surgery before. So it's a scary and daunting experience for a lot of people. And I think throughout the career that in neurosurgery that I had so far, I've just seen a lot of different ways that some of my colleagues have kind of helped patients along the way. And every time I've seen a good interaction, I'll kind of remember that and kind of use that in my next interaction and build on that. So I think that's really important, and it makes the whole interaction a lot better. Yeah, so I would say that's a useful skill I learned.
Thank you, Katha. That's great, because I can imagine that type of skill set is something that people can't necessarily learn just from a textbook. So it's great to hear that you're able to see that from your actual working life. So thank you. The next question we have is, when you entered each of your careers, what was the hardest challenge you had to overcome?
So I'll answer that a little bit because it's going to help people decide if they want to pursue a career in medicine. The hardest challenge you have to overcome as a doctor is people dying and breaking bad news to their family. It is the hardest thing in the world to tell someone that their 2-year-old that was in a car accident is gone. This is not an easy job. Even I've been a doctor for 5 years now, but even after 5 years in practice, I still have trouble looking the families in the eyes if I tell them a horrendous story like that we did everything we could. We pulled all the stops. We spent hours trying to resuscitate them, but we couldn't save your family member. This is something that never really goes away. I have had other doctors tell me they've worked for 20 years, 30 years as a doctor. When it came to breaking bad news, they still get an uneasy feeling in their chest and uneasy feeling in their stomach. If that's not something that you think you could handle or want to do on a regular basis, I wouldn't recommend a career in medicine. However, this is one of the bad things in medicine. It's one of the challenges that we have to overcome. But on the positive side, when you can tell that same family or a different family, look them in the eye and say, we have good news for you. We were able to save your family member. That also is very uplifting and rewarding. And it really is something that you can't describe that feeling. It's just wonderful to be able to tell a family member that their loved one is going to live. So my advice in that case is the most difficult challenge to overcome in medicine is dealing with life and death.
Thank you, Johnny, for sharing that really candid response. I can imagine that this is an aspect that many people may overlook or not be as aware of when they're entering the field. So thank you very much, Johnny. Is there anyone else that wants to add on to that question? If not, we can move on to the next prompt. So I think this is perhaps the last question we have for today. So is it difficult to move up the ladder in the science field? I'm guessing they're referring to, I guess, levels of administration, perhaps. So is there anyone that has insight on this question?
I think I would ask for clarification in which science field. I think it's it is based on the field.
Right. How about we interpret this as I guess in your various sectors, because as you know, science is huge. So let's interpret this as your respective sectors.
Well, in technology, it is not difficult. You just have to show competency and the ability you can deliver your projects or your work. I have CEOs that are CEOs of startups managing over 300 people, and they're 25, right? There are other directors that are 22. There are some directors at 24. That's obviously not all of them, but there you do see those edge cases, and it's whatever you can show and what you can prove in the technology field, which is what will get you there, and your network, who you know. If you know someone that's a VP somewhere and they really like you and know your work and know you can deliver, they will put you in a assistant VP position, right? So it's really on your network, who you know. It's not that difficult to move up. If you are alone, then it may be. And that's why you have to increase your network and network all the time.
Thank you, Stephen. I can imagine that's a very, like, networking is an essential part of many careers. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not taught in many class or coursework either. So thank you for emphasizing the importance of that. Is there anyone else that happens to have insight on this prompt? Okay, I think that's good for everything. So thank you everyone for contributing and staying a little bit longer. For the audience, thank you all for coming out today. I hope you're all able to learn more from all of our amazing panelists. We are live streaming this event on our Facebook, so feel free to go refer to our Facebook if you want to review any part that you may have missed. In addition, we'll be emailing the link out to our recordings after the event in a post email. So yeah, thank you all again for coming, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again to our panelists. Okay. Bye, everybody.